All right, good morning, everybody. For those of you who don't know me, my name is John Malky, and this is session 4 of Staying Alive. Now, first 2 sessions, I talked about my personal story and how I came to this new discovery and this new necessity of a new lifestyle. Then last time, we talked a little bit more specifically about the hazards of animal products as part of diet. And so I recommended a diet of little to no animal products and explained it. And I'll be talking more about that as time goes by. And today we're going to talk about some more specific things, particularly processed foods, which is kind of a huge topic. But before then, I want to start with the story of Naaman in the Old Testament, to serve as an example of being responsive to critical information. So this is from 2 Kings chapter 5, verses 9 through 14. And the little backdrop, Naaman was a Syrian commander, a very prominent person, very successful person in Syria back in the ancient days, but he had leprosy. We don't know exactly what the nature of it was, but imagine he had this big old skin problem. And he heard about this prophet in Israel that performed miracles. So he went to Elisha the prophet seeking healing. So I'll pick up the story here in verse 9. Then Naaman went with his horses and chariot, and he stood at the door of the house of Elisha. And Elisha sent a messenger to him, saying, "Go and wash in the Jordan River 7 times, and your flesh shall be restored to you, and you shall be clean." But Naaman became furious, and went away and said, "Indeed, I said to myself, he will surely come out to me and stand and call on the name of the Lord and his God, and wave his hand over the place and heal the leprosy. Are not the Abana and the Pharpar rivers, the rivers of Damascus, better than all the waters of Israel? Could I not wash in them and be clean?" So he turned and went away in a rage. And his servants came near and spoke to him and said, "My father, if the prophet had told you to do something great, would you not have done it? How much more then when he says to you, 'Wash and be clean'?" So he went down and dipped 7 times in the Jordan, according to the saying of the man of God. And his flesh was restored like the flesh of a little child, and he was clean. So at first he disdained this information, this truth, this instruction, because it was too simple. He wanted the man to come out and make a big fanfare about it. And Elisha wouldn't even meet him. Sent a messenger to the door. But ultimately, with a little urging, he came to realize, what have I got to lose? Can't do any harm, right? Even though it's a yucky river compared to my best rivers. So he tried it. And it didn't really matter what he thought. It only mattered what he did. It mattered if he followed through. Now, there was nothing about the water that was going to heal him. It was the process that God had called him to. And that's a miraculous event. But the principle is, if there's a pathway that'll lead you to somewhere you need to be, just follow that pathway. Don't disdain the truth just because it's simple. Don't be stuck in your bias. And follow all the way through. Because when he dipped the first time, he came up still leprous. He dipped a second time, still. A third time. A fourth time. A fifth time. A 6th time, no change. But when he came up the 7th time, he was healed. He had to follow all the way through. So that's what I'm recommending that you do, is if you find a truth that is valuable, be open to it. Don't say that it doesn't match your preconceived ideas or biases. Give it a try. Maybe it will work, especially if it has worked in the past. I'm living proof of that. So, throughout this series so far, I've talked a lot about what I don't eat. And I'm on a strict diet because of my cancer therapy. I don't eat animal products. I don't eat sugar. I don't eat oil. I don't eat processed foods. I don't eat chemicals. So the question arises, what do I eat? So I'll give you a little bit of summary just to satisfy your curiosity. I eat whole foods. And here's my typical day. For breakfast, I have oatmeal with fruit, or maybe cereal with oat milk, always with fruit. My typical lunch is mixed vegetables with brown rice or quinoa, which I spice up, plus fruit to go along with it. For dinner, there's going to be some potatoes, maybe some bean tostadas, maybe a vegetable dish my wife has made, maybe like a stew, maybe a salad, pizza or pasta, specially tailored to my needs, and fruit again. Now, when it comes to bread, I personally happen to have discovered a gluten sensitivity, so I go gluten-free on the bread, and I make my own. But I'll make pancakes out of it, make whatever else I want to make out of it. Pancakes with fruit puree is really good. For snacks, my go-to snack is fruit. If I want something, popcorn is another one, yeah. I cook it with hot air in the microwave, or have this hot air popper thing. Corn chips, I found a brand of corn chips that has no oil. Or maybe vegetables like celery or cucumber or tomato. Beverages, my go-to is carrot juice. It's like liquid life to me. Or I mix some other kind of vegetable juices in with it also, and we drink a lot of oat milk in the house. And that's just basically what I do. Just whole foods. I don't always make a sophisticated recipe. Now, my wife is more interested in finding more sophisticated recipes, and we'll talk more about that. She's trying to supply me some info on that so I can impart to you. But there's a huge world of vegetarian or vegan recipes out there that the internet has just got an avalanche of them. As long as you be careful to watch the ingredients. So, I've talked about the hazards of animal products. I've talked a little bit about the hazards of fat and oil. And today we're going to talk about processed foods. And what I mean by that is something different than a whole food. For example, I mentioned earlier, oil, for example. It's one thing to eat an olive, something else to eat olive oil. Olive oil comes from the olive, it's not the whole food. Or peanut oil, for example. You can eat the peanut on the one hand, or you can squeeze out the oil. Or another highly processed food, or commonly processed food, is white flour, which is what all your bread out there, most of it is made of. So let me start with that one. Because refined grains, vegetable oils, and chemicals are really what you find in processed foods. And I'm going to start with a diagram about a wheat kernel. There's a wheat kernel. It's got three parts. The bran, which is the outer coating, the hard sort of shell of it. This is after it's already been stripped of its chaff or its outer husk. This is the edible part. So the kernel consists of the bran on the outside, the germ down there at the bottom, which is what sprouts the thing, and the endosperm, which is the core of it, which is primarily consists of carbohydrates, which break down into simple sugars. And it's the endosperm that feeds the growing plant, until it's a little bit more mature and can get some sunlight. Now, it so happens that the bran and the germ are where most of the valuable nutrients are. But if you grind the whole kernel, you get a flour that is a little bit coarse, not as tasty or sweet as a flour made out of simply the endosperm. So what typically happens in manufacturing is the endosperm is what is used to make white flour. It's sweeter and easier to handle, it's more versatile. But it has fewer nutrients and is primarily the equivalent of sugar. So ideally you'd have the whole grain ground into powder and make your bread out of that. But white flour made out of pure endosperm, which they call wheat flour, is everywhere. It's in all of your wheat products. It's the primary way that they do it. Now, who decided that? And why is that everywhere? I mean, when you go to the store, you buy things, you assume they're safe and healthy, right? Otherwise they wouldn't be there, right? But who are you trusting? Who is in charge? We think, well, the government has rules, right? FDA, all these rules, USDA, they have rules, and they do. But who makes the rules? And who checks on them? Who is in charge? When you go to a restaurant, you order something, you don't know what's in it. You don't know what they're putting it in the kitchen. And if you want processed food, go to a restaurant. It's the most processed food. The oil, especially, is everywhere. Who makes those rules? Now, when you buy things, do you check the ingredient labels on every single thing, or do you just trust it? It's okay. The problem is, nobody is in charge. Never forget this. Nobody is in charge. You ask your doctor, are they in charge? They know what they've been taught. And in medical school, you know how much they teach on nutrition? Less than 1 hour. They don't know anything about it. They just don't. And they act like experts, and they're not. Nobody is in charge. Nobody is in charge. Now, it's safer today than it was, let's say, 100 years ago when there were no regulations, largely. But the government regulations are about prohibiting things that might kill you in an hour or a day when you ingest them. But they don't know what happens after a year or 5 years or 10 years. And they change their mind constantly as things turn out. And you don't know whether to trust them or not. It's a hit and miss proposition. Some things are trustworthy and some are not. And you have no way to know, nor does your doctor know. Now you can go and find experts that know a little bit more, but one expert may be very correct on something and not so correct on something else, and who's in charge? Nobody is in charge. You have to be in charge of your own choices and understanding and research. They don't teach this in school. Maybe they do for a minute. That's about it. So remember that. Nobody's in charge. Anything can happen. Just because it's on the shelf doesn't mean it's good. And we are living in a modern day when there is so much mistaken understanding about what is right and what is good, and it's on the shelves and we buy it, and it's killing us. We're very well fed, but we're undernourished because things are just not the way they ought to be. So, nobody's in charge. Remember that. Who's in charge? Nobody is in charge. So, we're going to go shopping. And I'm going to show you some products on the screen, very common products. And we're just going to read the labels. If you actually read labels, you will find things. Now, there's things that are in there that are not in the labels, but most of what's in the product is in the labels. And we're going to find out whether the labels are reliable, whether the words have meaning. So, let's start with flour. I said white flour. There it is, the white flour. It's got only the endosperm in it. Now, I said before that the germ and the bran are where all the nutrients are. So the government says, well, if you're going to make white flour that is lacking in nutrients, we require that you add some nutrients in. Now, I don't know how many nutrients are lost by omitting the important parts of the grain, but it's at least 20, maybe 20,000. I mean, there's a lot of them in there that are probably even undiscovered. So they're omitted. And the government says, to supplement for what we just omitted, we're going to bring back 5. Out of the many that are missing, we're going to bring back 5. And we're going to fortify the product. And it's required by law that they fortify the product with 5 particular nutrients. Not that those particular nutrients were relevant to that product, but the government, in its wisdom, thinks that these 5 are good for you, even though you've just lost at least 20, maybe many, many more. So let's look at the label, and we're going to see those. Okay, there it is. There's the label. And I'm going to enlarge it so you can see it. Here's the ingredients. Bleached white flour. Why do they bleach it? Bleached wheat flour. Why do they bleach it? I don't know. Do you know? I don't know. They get whiter. Okay, what does it do to it? I don't know. The problem with I don't know is it could be bad. It's probably not good. Whenever you see something and you go, I don't know, it probably means that's not good. And I don't know is going to come up a lot because we don't know any of these things. There's a complicated explanation for all this. So it's got the wheat flour. Is it really wheat? Well, technically it is, but it's not the whole wheat grain. It's just part of it. But they call it wheat. The word wheat flour means white flour, endosperm. Doesn't mean wheat, it means this particular thing, the white part of the grain. So anytime you see wheat flour, it just means endosperm. Now here are the nutrients. Niacin, iron, thiamine mononitrate, riboflavin, folic acid. 5. Do you need those? I think so. Is that what they took out? I don't know. But those 5 will show up anytime you have processed flour. They will be added in. And it looks very healthy, doesn't it? That they've enriched it. Sometimes they might call it enriched wheat flour. Ooh, it's enriched. Well, it's enriched because they've robbed it previously of its nutrients, but those are the 5 that they enrich it with. Now, how much do they give you? I don't know. They don't say. How much do you need? I don't know. Now, if you had the whole grain kernel, you wouldn't even worry about all that. It's got complete nutrition for whatever it's supposed to have. So white flour is everywhere in all your products, especially bread, right? Well, let's take a look at some bread. You ever buy bread at the store? Okay.
It does say the percent of those vitamins that's in there. How many milligrams, but usually under the
Oh, okay, there you go. Do you trust those percentages?
Well,
Does the government know? You know how much vitamin C I take every day? I take about maybe 1,000 times more than they recommend.
yeah, the percentages are off. The milligrams.
All right, here we go. You ever had some bread like that? Common variety?
I used to buy that bread.
What is it? It says wheat on it. You know, does anybody use white bread anymore? Like Wonder Bread? No, we kind of know it's bad. Well, this is wheat bread. Is that better? Is that the whole grain? Well, let's see. Ingredients say, there it is, unbleached. Oh, that seems like better. Enriched flour. It's enriched flour. And they call it wheat flour, but it's the endosperm. Malted barley flour. Maybe that's where they get a little bit of that brown color. This is white bread with a little brown color. It's got the niacin. There's the enrichment, right? The reduced iron, blah, blah, blah. It's also got high fructose corn syrup. Now, what is high fructose corn syrup? This is going to pop up a lot. It's sugar, and it's the worst kind of sugar. Let me briefly say, we're going to say more about sugar later, but let me briefly say there's 3 kinds of sugar you find in your diet primarily. One is sucrose, regular old table sugar, which is chemically a combination of fructose and glucose. Now, glucose is the simple sugar your cells need to survive. So when you eat sucrose of any variety, in any food, it'll break down into glucose and fructose. Fructose will go to the liver and be converted to glucose, and it's glucose that your body uses. Well, the reason they use high fructose corn syrup is because it's super sweet. It's sweeter than regular sugar. So it gives the sweetness that they want. It's cheaper and easier to use that way. But you would normally not just have plain fructose as a part of your sugar content of your food. You'd have a combination of a variety of things, and you'd have sort of a balance. But fructose is metabolized in the liver, and too much of it will put too much of a load on your liver. But it's everywhere. High fructose corn syrup. Now, you ever seen syrup come out of a corn kernel? I don't know how many kernels of corn it takes to extract, to process out syrup that's got a lot of fructose in it. So high fructose corn syrup means bad sugar. That's what it means, bad sugar. What else does it have? Let's see. Okay, so it adds in some whole wheat flour to give it the brown. So it's a combination. It's not whole wheat. It's not whole. Now, whole wheat may have a little bit of bran and a little bit of germ, but mostly endosperm. It's not necessarily whole grain. So it's got some of it in there, and they use it to dilute the endosperm flour to give it the brown color to pretend like it's wheat bread. But it's mostly white bread, no matter whether it's the enriched wheat flour or it is the whole wheat flour, it's still mostly endosperm. Until you see whole grain, it's just not whole grain. And even then, the labels are very unclear. What else has it got? Molasses, that's a sugar product. Now molasses I'm not too worried about because it's got a lot of minerals in it. Molasses is one of the steps in making sugar, and it's got a lot of concentrated minerals. Okay, what else has it got? Salt. Salt is another subject we're going to be talking about. Salt is everywhere. It's in all these products. Now a little bit of salt isn't going to kill you, but the salt you have in your products and on your table in your salt shaker is refined salt. It's just pure sodium chloride plus a few additives that you don't know about. It's not really evaporated seawater or mined salt that's from previous evaporated seawater, which has about 80 some odd minerals besides just the salt, which is good for you. This is just refined salt, pure sodium chloride, and we'll talk about that later, but it's everywhere. Butter. Okay, you got some butter in there. Soybean oil. Again, oil is everywhere. If you're trying to cut oil, watch out because it's everywhere. Some more cultural wheat flour. Honey, another name ultimately for sugar. Dough conditioners. Here we go. Sodium stearoyl lactylate. What is that? I don't know. If you were baking bread, would you go to the store and say, I need some sodium stearoyl lactylate to add to my recipe? No, you would never do that. What is calcium stearoyl lactylate? Monoglycerides, mono and diglycerides, distilled monoglycerides, calcium peroxide, calcium iodate, DATEM, which is an acronym for some long, huge chemical thing, ethyl xylated mono and diglycerides, enzymes, ascorbic acid is vitamin C, monocalcium phosphate, I don't know what that is. Soy lecithin is something processed out of soy, I don't know exactly what. You know, people are worried about soy. Oh, soy is bad. If you had a whole soybean, you're okay. Soy is okay as a whole food. Soy lecithin, I don't know what that is. Comes something from soy. It's not a whole food. Wheat starch. What is wheat starch? It's endosperm. It's another word for it. Okay, then comes the further niacin reduced iron. That's part of the wheat starch, I guess. And calcium carbonate. Calcium carbonate is an alkali. Soy flour, okay. Calcium proponiate to retard spoilage. It's a preservative. So your bread has a lot of stuff in it that you wouldn't put in it if you were baking your own bread, and we don't even know what those are. What about these? Don't you love these? Typical white bread type of thing. Everybody likes these here, these dinner rolls. Well, what's in it? Well, it's got that enriched flour. Now, it's going to be tedious to go through these, but if you were in the grocery store, you should do this. Every product, pull it off the shelf, look at the ingredients, and see what's there. See what the government thinks is safe for you to have, but is killing you. So you got the enriched flour. It's got the 5 nutrients. It's got some sugar, some butter, milk, eggs, sodium silicoaluminate. Sounds like aluminum to me. Did you know aluminum is a highly potent neurotoxin? What else is in there? Monocalcium phosphate. Potato flour. Okay, they use potato flour as a good starch substitute. Sorbitan monostearate. There's the salt again, it's everywhere. Datum, that weird thing again. Calcium silicate. Calcium sulfate, ammonium sulfate, sodium stearoyl lactylate, sorbic acid monodiglycerides. There's the wheat starch again. So they don't tell you what these chemicals are. Now, if you wanted to look them up, we have the beautiful thing called the internet. You can find out what these things are, but it'll take you forever to research every single one of them. You can't possibly know enough when you're out there on the shopping in the store, doing your shopping, reading. You don't know what these are. I don't know what they are. I've looked up a few of them once in a while, but I get tired of looking up the same thing. It's like, well, it gets bad. It's bad. It's bad. It's bad. It's bad.
It's hard to find too. Like when you look it up, it may just say what it does. You know, as a dough extender. Or
Preservative, yeah.
but it
Dough
may not-
conditioner.
Depending on the source where you find it, it may not tell you what it really does to your body.
That's
Like,
right.
The phosphate, whatever, added phosphate, or chemical phosphate added to foods, it's hard on the kidneys.
Yeah. And you don't know that.
Not kidney disease.
So you get the word from your doctor, oh, you got kidney disease, oh, you got cancer, oh, you got this. Well, this one is better, right? Whole wheat. Look how much browner it is, right? Well, what's in it? Well, there's the whole wheat flour. Is it really whole wheat? I don't know if it's really whole grain. Bulgur wheat, I do know that is more of a likely to be a whole wheat product, but it's got sugar. And oil. Oil is everywhere. Soybean oil in this case. It's everywhere. Now, if you squeeze a soybean hard enough, you'll get some oil. If you squeeze a corn kernel hard enough, is there really any oil in there? There's not much. It takes a lot of corn, a lot of processing to get oil out of corn. To get oil out of canola seeds. To get oil out of a lot of weird things, cotton seeds. So they may call it vegetable oil. It's probably canola oil or some kind of seed oil. Some foods are higher in oil naturally. The ones that are higher in oil naturally are probably more healthy because you're getting something closer to the whole product, even though you're getting just the oil. But the smaller the concentration of the oil in the product, the less likely it is to be healthy for you to have it in a concentrated form. So it takes a whole bushel full of corn to get a few drops of oil. That's a lot of potency there and a lot of processing to make it happen. A lot of chemicals and a lot of... The end product is nothing like what came out of the thing to begin with.
This one, if you're going to choose one of those, this is a better one because just looking at the sheer quantity.
It's got less stuff.
It's a lot smaller.
Yeah, looks better. So it's got cultured wheat flour, whatever that is. It's got grain vinegar, natural flavors. What are the natural flavors? Who knows what they are? Is corn oil a natural flavor? Sort of is, comes from corn, but is it really natural? Citric acid I don't worry too much about. So anyway, the products differ just by looking at the... What about this one? It's 100% whole wheat and it's nature's own. It seems very natural. I would rather have natural, wouldn't I? Well, this one's stone ground wheat. Does it really matter whether it's stone ground or not? Anyway, it's whole wheat flour. I'm not sure what that means. It's got brown sugar. It's got dough conditioner. It's got salt, sodium stearoyl lactylate, calcium stearoyl lactylate. It's got the same kind of thing as the first one. Soybean oil. So I'm finding sugar, salt, and oil everywhere. Sugar, salt, and oil, very common. Salt, oil, and sugar. SOS. Danger, help. SOS, salt, oil, and sugar. There are people that in the nutrition business that say, stay away from, go SOS-free diet. SOS-free, salt, oil, and sugar. Good advice. A lot of chemicals. At least we know natamycin is to retard spoilage. I think the word natamycin sounds like an antibiotic. I don't know. I don't know. Anytime I ask myself something and I say, I don't know, it's probably not a good idea. I don't know is good because it's a warning to you. Now, this bread looks even browner. Nature's Harvest. It looks a little bit better. It's got the whole wheat flour, whatever that means. It's got a little sugar, a little vegetable oil. It's got the wheat bran added in. I don't know why they took it out in the first place. It's got the salt, honey, molasses, a little bit of preservatives, blah, blah, blah. It's got a little less. See, so if you're going to kill yourself, you do it a little more slowly. Maybe this is a better choice for you. You wouldn't know that if you didn't read the label. Now, let's get into something a little bit more truly healthy. This one's got 21 whole grains and seeds. And this guy looks really healthy, right? Especially with his electric guitar and his long hair. He's really very conscientious, Dave. Dave's Killer Bread. Well, what does Dave's Killer Bread have in it? Well, it's got a lot of different grains. Let's see. Organic whole wheat, cracked whole wheat, organic cane sugar. Okay, it's got sugar. But it's got a lot of all these other seeds, 21 seeds, blah, blah, blah. I think those are okay.
It does have some whole grains. See the difference between whole wheat up at the top, whole wheat, but then a few down, third line down, it's whole grain.
All grains and seeds. Well, yeah, okay. So there they are, a bunch of them. Okay, like triticale is the wheat. A lot of stuff. And then we get down here to the bottom. 2% or less of each of the following. Molasses, okay, kind of sugary. Sea salt. It's trying to tell me it's something different than refined salt. Sea salt. Maybe got more minerals. Vinegar, cultured wheat flour, enzymes, organic, blah, blah. I don't see any chemicals.
I'd say that's a good one.
That's no chemicals. How about that?
Keep it in the freezer.
It's going to cost you $6 a loaf. That's the thing.
Yeah, Costco.
Okay, so there you go. Better choice by reading the ingredients. Here's another one. You ever heard of Ezekiel bread? Made from a recipe found in the Bible. God gave Ezekiel this particular mission, is to make this bread, and so we've been copying this recipe. What's in it? Well, let's blow this up. It's got sprouted wheat. Now that sounds to me like the whole kernel. You got to have the whole kernel to sprout that thing. And by the way, sprouted grains have enzymes and nutrients that other unsprouted grains don't. So they're better. It's got to be the whole kernel. It's got some barley, blah, blah, blah. I don't see any chemicals at all. A little sea salt at the back end of the description. Pretty good stuff. Again, expensive.
If you're not gluten-free.
I've never had this because I discovered it after I went gluten-free. I'm not recommending or unrecommending anything. I'm just reading labels. Just reading labels. Now this is very healthy, right? Cheerios. Everybody says it helps the heart. It can help lower cholesterol. The red banner says so.
We feed a ton of that to our toddlers.
I lived on this stuff. Well, oats, it's made out of oats. Well, oats is good. I eat oatmeal every day. Well, what's in it? Well, let's read the label. It's got whole grain oats. I like that. But it's also got corn starch. That's the endosperm of the corn kernel. So they've turned a whole grain into a non-whole grain. It's got a lot of sugar. Top of the list, sugar. Makes it taste better. And it's got salt. And then there's this stuff, tripotassium phosphate. You know what I use TSP for? You ever use TSP? You buy it at Home Depot. You can clean your woodworking projects before you stain them.
Or it's not.
That's TSP. It's added, well, vitamin E is added to preserve freshness. Tripotassium phosphate.
Is that TS? Oh, no, it is.
Trisodium phosphate?
So,
I looked this up and I thought it was the same as TSP. The point is, I don't know what it is. It can't really be great for you. It's got the added stuff. Okay, the added stuff. Because they think you need it. They're probably, those additives are okay, but they're telegraphing to you that they think they know better than they really do. Here's another popular thing, cornflakes. Now again, I lived on this stuff growing up. The thing about cornflakes is it wouldn't be so bad. Look at that, it's got milled corn, which sounds like the whole kernel. But then it's got sugar right at the top of the list. I think if you had cornflakes that didn't have sugar, you probably wouldn't like the taste. Malt flavor, don't know what that is, but it's got salt too. Plus it adds in the minerals and vitamins. Maybe that's because the milled corn is actually something reduced, not a whole grain. But we don't know. The hazard here is the sugar, I think.
Mr. Kellogg was hugely instrumental in making our breakfast in America highly just endosperm wheat.
There you go. Kellogg is a big pioneer of white flour. This is the cereal I eat, one variety I eat. Made by Arrowhead Mills, it's puffed millet. Millet is a grain. The ingredients are millet, nothing else. It's not sweet.
Yeah, fruit.
Add fruit. There's another thing I eat. Barbara's Honest O's. This is the competitor to Cheerios. And it is made of organic whole grain oats. Got some corn in there, some oat bran, apple juice concentrate for sweetness. Now, I'm not a huge fan of juice because it concentrates sugar, but I'd rather have apple juice than sugar. It's got a little sea salt, which is better than regular salt, if that's really what it is. So this is my Cheerios alternative. Now, this particular brand, you might think, oh, great, I can use this brand a lot. Well, this one is the only one that meets my qualifications out of dozens of items on that company's product list.
Where do you get it?
I get it at Sprouts. Okay, speaking of baking with your flour, this is baking powder that, anybody ever used baking powder when you're baking? Okay, what is this for? It's to leaven the dough, make it fluffy. How does it do that? It's got an acid and an alkali. When they get wet, they combine, it produces carbon dioxide gas and salt, a salt substance. The carbon dioxide gas is what fluffs up the dough. Yeast does something similar, a different way. The yeast cells, they consume the sugar and carbohydrates in the dough, and they give off alcohol and carbon dioxide as byproducts, and both of those will bubble up in the dough and fluff it up. So you can use yeast or baking powder to do a similar kind of thing. Sometimes you use both in a recipe. But the thing about baking powder is, what's it made of? This is America's leading brand. It's everywhere. What's in it? Does anybody check the label when they use it? What's in it? Well, let's just see what's in it. It's got cornstarch. Okay, that's the endosperm of the corn kernel, and it's got sodium bicarbonate. That's the alkali, pretty harmless. And then for the acid, it's got sodium aluminum sulfate. I already heard myself say that aluminum is a potent neurotoxin. I don't know what monocalcium phosphate is, but I don't want aluminum or phosphate. Well, yeah, phosphate is the acid. Aluminum sulfate may be one of the alkali, but the point is, if you're worried about kidneys, watch out for phosphate. If you're worried about brain, watch out for aluminum. Aluminum does not belong in a human diet. So there's an alternative. The only one I've found that I'll use is this one, Trader Joe's baking powder. I don't get it from Trader Joe's, I get it on Amazon. Let me show you the ingredients of this one. This has got monocalcium phosphate. It's the only way you can get the acid, and sodium bicarbonate and cornstarch. Doesn't have the aluminum. Now, when you buy a baked product and it's got baking powder in it that may or may not be on the ingredient list, what kind of baking powder was it? We don't know. The cheapest kind. So, probably aluminum. So, that's a lot about chemicals in general. Let me talk a little bit about oil again. Now, back in the day, 150 years ago, you could not go to the store and buy Crisco or typical corn oil. It was not really invented or popular yet. When people wanted oil, they would have olive oil. It's easy to make in terms of compared to other types of highly processed oils. But back in the 1800s, cotton became a huge crop in America. Never before was cotton ever really used for anything in the world, until it was discovered, hey, this is really useful to make cloth. So cotton production exploded in America in the 1800s, especially with the invention of the cotton gin by Mr. Eli Whitney, making that machinery do all the work and harvest the cotton. Now, cotton produces two things, the cotton fiber and a lot of cotton seeds. And the seeds have no value, no use. They're a nuisance. They're not very good for animal feed. They only need to harvest it. They only need to keep a certain small percentage of them to reseed the crops. But 95% of the cotton seeds are just a nuisance. And so there was an effort by Procter & Gamble to try to find a use for cotton seeds, because it was known how to make cottonseed oil by just grinding it and pressing it and get a little oil to seep out of there. And that oil could be used for lubricant. Machinery needs lubricant, right? This is before the discovery of petroleum in the ground. You had to use vegetable oils for lubricants. And it's good for maybe a little cooking, even though it's not food. Nobody eats cottonseed. Why would you eat the cottonseed oil? But it can be used for cooking. And the problem is, though, it's competing against lard and beef tallow as cooking substances that would be used for oil. You know, pork lard and beef tallow were the staples for cooking. And today we kind of think of those as unhealthy, but they're probably not as unhealthy as the processed oils we use today. So anyway, Procter & Gamble was looking for a way to compete with animal product fats, try to make a buck. So they got a hold of an inventor that managed to convert cottonseed oil into a white flaky substance we call today Crisco. He infused hydrogen into the mix, and hydrogenated oils turn a liquid oil into a firm substance. And this is where we got Crisco. Crisco was marketed as the best thing ever because it has no taste. When you fry chicken, do you want it to taste like pork lard? And no, you don't. You want it to taste like chicken. Well, Crisco has no taste. And most of it, well, a lot of it comes back out of it and can be reused without a lot of residue in it. So it's a little cheaper to use, cheaper to make, cheaper to use. And it looked beautiful. It was white and flaky.
Well, it has a higher burn temperature too, so you can get fried things hotter.
It was better in every way, and they thought it was healthier, easier to digest, and they're marketing it as the best thing ever, superior to all competitors. When in reality, it took 100 years, well, almost 100 years, for the powers that be, that remember nobody's in charge, the people that think they're in charge, to finally say, in the 1990s, this stuff is bad for you, it's killing us. Because the hydrogenated oil is not food. First of all, cottonseed oil is not food. A lot of vegetable oil is not food. Then when you hydrogenate it, now it's not food at all. Does all kinds of damage. Heart damage, cancer, diabetes. It's the worst kind of thing. Hydrogenated oil is the worst kind of thing ever. This is what they make margarine out of. It's what they used to put in Skippy peanut butter to make it not so runny. Because peanut oil, I didn't say, when I say they put it in there, what I mean is they convert the peanut oil to hydrogenated peanut oil. You know, peanut oil separates from the substance. You buy the old-fashioned oil that has none of this hydrogenated stuff in it, well, the oil floats, you got to mix it in. Well, they thought that was bad, thought that was inconvenient, not so appealing, make it all a creamy substance. They hydrogenate the oil to make it thick. And I lived on Skippy peanut butter, on sourdough white bread, or any kind of other French bread. French bread is great for peanut butter sandwiches. And on Hershey bars, and a tall glass of milk. I was killing myself and didn't know it. But the hydrogenated oils now, they're recognized as bad, even though Crisco is still on the shelf, because nobody's in charge. But your peanut butters now, they don't have hydrogenated oil as much anymore. They mix in coconut oil, which is a naturally thicker oil, and that gives it a similar texture.
Some might still have some.
Well, when you find it, you want to avoid it. Hydrogenated oil, of all the different kinds of oils, hydrogenated oil, that thick white stuff, is bad. All right. What's next? We're still shopping. Our shopping cart is only half full. And by the way, oil, again, it's everywhere. And it's not food. What's next? Oh, let me back up. Oh, there it is. This is the ingredients of Crisco. Soybean oil. They don't make it out of cottonseed anymore because you can make it out of any oil with their new technology. Fully hydrogenated palm oil. Sometimes you'll see a label that says partially hydrogenated oil. This is fully hydrogenated oil because it's Crisco. It's the real thing. Blah, blah, blah. What is TBHQ? I don't know. Well, it's an antioxidant. That's one thing. Okay, fine. Whatever. This stuff is bad. I don't recommend certain things. This is different. I don't just not recommend it. I say it's bad. This is one of the worst. Now, let me talk a little bit more about salt, because we've seen it come up a lot. Salt in the ocean, if you dehydrate ocean water, if you evaporate the water out of seawater, you're going to be left with salt, right? And a lot of other chemicals. The chemical makeup of ocean water is much like the chemical makeup of your own body's fluids. If you eat sea salt, it sort of matches your body chemistry. Unlike pure salt, which is just sodium chloride, there's no store in your body of pure sodium chloride. It's always mixed with something else, minerals and basically minerals. So sea salt is better than refined salt. And refined salt has additives in it to make it not clump, because salt will attract water vapor from the air and get clumpy. And they add iodine to salt because they think you're deficient. Because back in the day, a lot of the population was deficient because they weren't eating a balanced diet. Now they add iodine to make sure you get iodine. Okay, fine, whatever. But if you eat a balanced diet, you're not going to be deficient in iodine. You don't need to buy iodized salt if you're on a balanced diet. So when you see SEE, salt, in ingredient lists, it's typically refined salt, not sea salt. Sea salt comes from 3 sources. You can evaporate the ocean water. You can dig a mine from previously evaporated ocean. There's mines full of it. And there are some in, they're all over the world. Those are the 2 sources, salt mines and the ocean. I said 3, but I meant 2. Those are good. Those are true sea salt. Sometimes the label will say sea salt, but we don't know if that's true because every salt grain ultimately came from the ocean. It's always sea salt. You go to Costco, you buy a plastic bottle full of sea salt. The ingredients say sea salt, but it's white. Sea salt is not white. That's pure sodium chloride. Sea salt is gray. It has more minerals than just salt. It is gray. If it's white, it's not sea salt. I mean, it's sea salt technically because all salt comes from the ocean somehow, but it's then refined so that everything's taken out of it except the salt. And they can call it sea salt, but you don't know what it really is because nobody's in charge. They can say anything they want, and it sounds healthier to say sea salt, even if it's not. I don't know. I don't think so, because sodium chloride by itself is a particular molecule, and it's white. That is mine salt, and that is good stuff. The reason it's pink is because it's got more minerals in it, and the pinkness comes from a little bit of iron in that salt. Now, you don't need a lot of iron, but a little bit is good for you. So salt is everywhere, and we don't know what it is, no matter what they call it. Chemicals, as we've seen, are everywhere, and we don't know what they are. So here we go. Back at it. Our shopping cart is only half full. What are we going to buy next? Popular things. I love these Cheez-Its. Don't you love Cheez-Its? Now, snack foods are the biggest culprits when it comes to bad ingredients. And this is besides the cheese. Okay, we talked about animal products before. I'm not even going to talk about cheese today, but it's got the enriched flour, which is, wow, it's wheat flour. But it's the endosperm. It's white flour. It's got the, and we know that because it's got the extra things added to it. It's got vegetable oil. What kind of vegetable oil? Well, there's this high oleic soybean oil. There's palm. Canola oil. Canola oil is a human invention. It's got this thing, TBHQ, I don't know what that is. And let's find out what's in the cheese. Salt is in cheese. Not only is it not sea salt, but did you know cheese is high salt content? Huge high salt content. On top of the cheese that has salt, they add salt. There's salt everywhere in these kind of products. So this has got everything that we don't really think is that great. It's all bundled into one processed product. What else? Oh, I love these Doritos. Look at all this stuff. Well, it's got vegetable oil near the top of the list. Could be sunflower, canola, or corn oil. Maltodextrin is sugar. Salt, high on the list. Then there's the cheese that has salt. Then there's the Romano cheese that has salt. Monosodium glutamate, that's bad. What else do we got here? Dextrose, sugar.
Artificial flavors.
Lactose, sugar. Artificial color, not too great, right?
That's bad.
Bad. Sugar, and then it's got plain old sugar. It's got a variety of different kinds of sugars. I don't know what disodium inositate is, blah, blah, blah. There's a lot of stuff in there. I don't know what it is. Most of it is bad. We lived on these goldfish. These things are addictive. Remember when Costco first was invented? This stuff was one of their main things. It's got the wheat flour, it's got the additives, it's got the cheese with its salt, it's got the vegetable oils, it's got the more salt, it's got some sugar. You know, we feed these to the kids. Isn't it great? They can just, the little toddlers can just eat those little fishies. It's not good. Ritz. Oh, they're so flaky. They're nice, right? It's got the enriched flour. Everything's got the flour. Everything's got the oil. Everything's got the sugar. Everything's got the salt. Everything's got the... What else? This one doesn't have too many chemicals. I don't know what soy lecithin is, but it's got the high fructose corn syrup. I don't know what natural flavor is.
I used to think natural flavor just meant, oh, it's not artificial, it's just what the ingredients have made it to taste like.
But it's an additive.
Natural additive.
This looks really good, right? Whole grain. It looks like a healthy alternative, wheat thins. Well, let's just see. It's got the wheat flour. Oh, it's got canola oil. Right at the top, canola oil. It's got sugar. Cornstarch is the endosperm of the corn kernel. Salt, of course. Syrup. It's got all the things we're careful to watch out for. I used to eat these Triscuit before I discovered that I don't want oil, because it's just wheat, whole grain wheat. How about that? But it's got the oil. Sea salt, maybe, okay. But then it's got the BHT added to the packaging material, whatever that means. But it's whole grain, looks really great. But then there's that oil.
But if you're going to choose one of those guys,
Kill you a little slower.
they're alternatives.
Now, what about rice? This is America's favorite rice. Rice is good. But there's two kinds of rice. There's white rice and there's brown rice. White rice is primarily the endosperm of the rice kernel. Brown rice is brown because it has the outer bran coating and the germ is in there. And that's the difference between brown rice and white rice. White rice is much like wheat flour, primarily sugar. Now, I will say that white rice is more nutritious than white wheat flour. But it's not as nutritious as brown rice that has the full spectrum of nutrients that are part of that natural product. But white rice tastes a little bit better, right? But now that I've switched to brown rice, I don't remember a difference between the taste of brown rice and white rice, even though I did at first. I don't now. And I don't really eat it very much plain by itself. I'm going to mix it with something, you know, spices or vegetables or whatever. Works great. So they enrich these. See, extra long enriched. Now, it's one thing to enrich flour, because flour is a powder. And when they're going to add those additives, those vitamins and so forth, I'm assuming that's probably a powdered substance, and then powder mixes with powder very well. But rice is not a powder. How do they get those additives in the rice? By the way, let's look at the ingredients. There it is. It's the rice, and then it's got the additives. This product is nothing but rice and additives. No chemicals. It's got the nutritional additives. But how do they get the additives in the rice? Well, they spray it on. That's why when you cook white rice, what's the ratio? 2 parts water to 1 part rice. And you let the water boil off or seep into the rice so you don't drain off any water. Like you would when you make pasta. When you make pasta, you use a lot of water, right? You let it cook to whatever texture you like, and then you drain off the water. You're left with the pasta. You can cook rice the same way, like pasta. You can cook it with a lot of water, drain it off, and that way you can control what texture you really want. Find it at the right spot, stop it there, drain off the water. Some people like it sticky, some people like it not so sticky. You can make it however you like. But if you do that, if you drain off water by making rice, you are going to rinse off all of the nutrients that you may or may not really need anyway, but they're sprayed on. So that's why when you cook white rice, you don't use excess water so that none of those things get lost. Now when I make brown rice, I do cook it with a lot of water because I'm not worried about that issue that doesn't exist. I make it with a lot of water and I drain it like pasta. That way I get the texture I want, you know, I test it as I go. And the other reason for that is because, here's something that they will never tell you because nobody's in charge. What rice could have arsenic. Why? Well, back in the day when cotton was the big deal, they would use arsenic as insecticide. So a lot of cotton fields are saturated with arsenic. Now, most crops will not draw up the arsenic very much to be of any concern, but rice will. And a lot of rice is grown on former cotton fields. Because rice is grown in a flooded field with a lot of water, and the rice kernel draws a lot of water in its growth, the arsenic will be in the rice. Now, the question is, does your rice that you buy, the brand you like, have arsenic? Well, the difference between whether the brands that do and the brands that don't is where was it grown? Is it grown on a former cotton seed, a cotton growing field? How do you know? Well, there's one clue, and that is that the newer the farm, the less likely to have a history of cotton growing. And the newest farms are in California. So I buy strictly California rice to reduce the chances of arsenic in rice. Furthermore, to make sure that I'm trying to leach out the arsenic, I use a lot of water and drain it off in the making of rice. And I do it in I do it in multiple steps. I'll just say this briefly. It's on my website with more detail. My website is icuredcancer.com. Here's what I do. I take the brown rice and I soak it in water overnight. And then I drain off that water. That's rinse number one. Then I boil water, bring it to a boil, a lot of it, and I put the rice in it and I boil it for 5 minutes. Parboil. Then I drain that water off. Then I cook it again with new water, about 5-to-1 ratio, water to rice. I cook it to my liking, drain off that water, now I got my rice. So it's been through about 3 rinses. That's my way of making sure that if there's any arsenic, I've rinsed off as much, leached out as much as I can. Nobody tells you this because nobody's in charge. All right, so our shopping cart is only half full. For you pessimists out there, it's half empty. But we're not done shopping. Our time is done for today, but we're going to continue shopping next time, and we're going to find out what is in what we have every day. Okay? Thank you for coming.